It's been a little while. In that original video, I did sort of imply that I might cover other sections of Starsector eventually, and it's probably about time to do so. There is a lot to go over. Starsector's writing, modding scene, graphics, and technical aspects could all get a video on their own, and if I ever do make them, they will probably show up here in a card. Today, however, I want to talk about the campaign mechanics in Nexerelin, because the two are practically intertwined. I intentionally barely touched on this in the first video about Starsector's combat to keep it concise and to the point, but Starsector's actual game outside of the combat is also really, really impressive. I've seen the phrase, "the game world feels alive," thrown around plenty in reference to other games, namely something like Deus Ex. Obviously this is subjective, but I have never felt this sentiment about a world feeling alive being true anywhere except in Starsector, really. I'm sure people will throw up their examples like, actually, Kovacs Aim Trainer has a really deep world when you get into it. But let me throw up some real examples. Such praise is usually leveled at RPGs or immersive sims. Deus Ex does take a pretty good stab at it, but like plenty of other games, the limited patrol paths and easily exhaustible dialogue make it obvious quite fast that this is in fact a video game. Games that are usually seen as lived in, like Dishonored, use a combination of a variety of idle dialogue, scripted events when a player first shows up, and a relatively quick level pace to give the illusion of life. It's important not to have the player stew somewhere too long or they might realize the limitations of the area that they're in. Immersion is bound to die pretty fast after that happens. Starsector feels lived in for reasons that couldn't be more different. It doesn't feel like a world that's truly alive because it has well-established or developed characters or interesting set pieces.
Oh. Tactical roll, baby!
It feels alive because of how dynamic the game is at a fundamental level. For example, ports have dynamic prices for every commodity in the game, and all of these prices are unique to every port. The prices at any given time are the results of a variety of factors which all play into each other. At the very top you have faction relations. If two factions are at war, ports will be ravaged by it, either through blockades, sabotage, or straight-up invasions. These ports, then, will need to use all of their heavy armaments to repel these invasions, which creates a deficit that the player can then exploit for ridiculously large sums of money. Likewise, if two factions like each other more, there is more trade between their systems, and thus there's more likely to be an excess of certain commodities at their ports if one faction is overproducing a certain resource. This creates a surplus which, once again, the player can exploit for their own gain. Faction relations result in war, which result in battles and exhaustion of resources, which results in deficits, which results in money. It's not like any of these are scripted events either. These ports don't have their exports and imports set in a file somewhere. They're all part of the colony system, and as the player you can make your own colonies or take over established ones. Then you can work on developing them, which influences what resources they're consuming and exporting. It's up to you to make the most prosperous planet in the sector, and to eventually have everyone else eating out of the palm of your hand. The best part about all this is that Starsector actively tells you that this is going on. This little page right here makes it very clear what is going on where, and it clearly signposts for you that the game has some pretty cool systems going on under the hood. Did you know that Mount and Blade has some pretty similar systems? I doubt it, because the game sure never tells you about any of it. Alright, I might have got a little sidetracked. When you begin the game, Nexerelin. Remember what I talked about before with faction relations? Yeah, that's mostly Nexerelin exclusive. I see it as so essential to Starsector's experience that it might as well just be mandatory and part of the base game. It turns Starsector into a 4X game, a la Endless Space or Stellaris crossed with Horse and Force. The original base game doesn't really have as much going on, and certainly not as much of a concrete goal. With Nexerelin, your end goal is pretty damn raw. Become the undisputed warlord and or monarch of the sector. You start off pretty far from a king, though. You can either start as a commissioned peacekeeper in an established faction, a mercenary with your own faction, or one with no borders to define themselves against the world. Your starting fleet can range from a single super deadly ship, a small or large trade convoy or military patrol, or one of the worst ships in the game. If you're positively unhinged, you could start with dramatically negative relations with everyone in the sector, a trash can of a spaceship, and a massive loan you need to repay. It's pretty fun. So, okay. You've picked someone to help, or you've decided to go it alone, and are now floating around the cosmos. What the hell do you do? Your career as a starfarer has 4 chapters. First, here, you start with Chapter 1, Clear Skies. You have very little to your name, but that can be fixed very fast and very easily. Your first order of operations is to find a way to grow your capital. My preferred way to achieve this is not exploration contracts or bounties early on. Instead, you're going to want to get a freighter of decent size, maybe 2. Once you get a decent sized cargo capacity, you've officially entered Chapter 2. Stepping Stone. You can press F1 on any commodity to see where it's being bought and sold for the highest and lowest prices respectively. This lets you instantly map out a trade route to know where to buy and where to sell. You're going to pretty much exclusively want to smuggle heavy ordnance and space drugs. They're illegal in most faction systems for a reason. The reason you focus on smuggling these 2 commodities specifically, and not like anything else, is because they have by far and large the best and most consistent margins out of any commodity in the game. It is much more common to make 2 to 3 times more in your investment than to not when becoming an arms dealer. And if you have any more complications with that, it's probably time for you to go back to the 21st century. It's important to note that this phase never necessarily ends. You will end up becoming the single most dangerous warlord in the entire sector, with an entire empire behind you, and you will still be found personally smuggling Omnics from planet to planet. But eventually, you will look upon your gigantic pile of money and wonder, what if you spent it on something? This is where you enter Chapter 3, Cold War. You may have started off as one of the smallest fries in the fryer, but you've come so far up now that you're perfectly able to buy ships off major factions with the reckless abandon of a kid in a candy shop. Now you may notice that factions refuse to sell to you if you're not commissioned or allied to them and with a fantastic standing. There are plenty of ways to circumvent this though. You can get them through agent actions, and occasionally, capitals will still show up on the black market. Although there's a good chance these will be busted up to hell and back. Not really relevant with this perk though. You should have these perks, by the way, they're the best by far. The other way to acquire ships you want is by murdering them and hoping they are available to salvage at the end of the fight, which mercifully isn't too unlikely. Once you do get powerful enough to attempt that last one, you've officially entered Chapter 4, Kings. You've gathered this vast armada now. It's probably about time you found something to do with it. Then you realize your faction, your character, your actions, it's all happening again. You might even consider stopping, but...
No, not yet.
I know I said no more plane games for at least a year, but you've been swindled. This was secretly a Project Wingman video all along. Adding those references to the script was quite fun. Know that if you choose to play Starsector, which you should, that this very well may happen to you like it happened to me. But at least you might end up with a sick radio filter.